I really just want to dive into the presentation. I've just started speaking to Vistage. My exec team are all in Vistage. I'm in YPO and have done for about 10 years. But I'm a real fan of peer learning. It's really changed my life. And, the point of, this session is really, I'm not a speaker, I'm an entrepreneur. And I really want to share with you best practices so that you guys have a methodology for how you grow businesses. So what we're going to be talking today is mainly around how do we have agile businesses so that when things like tariffs happen and COVID happens, we're not sitting on our hands. In fact, well, everybody else is paralyzed. We're jumping into action and make sure that we're surviving, but not only surviving, but thriving in times like this. So I'm going to be talking to you about the process for how I build and drive growth inside the businesses that I've owned, and also now for our clients. So that's me and my business partner. Just for context, I'm the visionary. She's the integrator. She has a big tech background. She's been talking about AI since 15 years ago when I met her. So it's definitely not a new term in our household. But between the two of us, I usually come up with all the strategies, and she's the one who helps with maximizing that through the tech play, which is a lot of AI nowadays. The two companies that we have for context is EGS. So does anyone here know EOS or have read the book Traction? Great. So EOS scaling up, there's different models, but really what I loved about it was a system and process for how I run the business, but it was only for operations. Over the last 25 years, having built and exited a lot of businesses, every time I find something that works, I turn it into a system or a framework in the same way that they have for EOS. I really believe, and I've proven, that marketing and growth isn't a crystal ball. It's very much a repeatable, scalable process. So that's the systems that we create, and we're constantly refining those, especially in the light of AI. And then separate to that, one of my secret sources has been offshoring. And not offshoring the way that most Americans know offshoring, which is, the bad experiences we've all had when we've had to call T-Mobile or the like. 20 years ago, when I was looking for great talent, but didn't have the capital, to support, hiring people over 200,000 that I needed onshore, I started looking into offshoring, and I've tried everything from India, which stood for I'll never do it again, to nearshoring, Paul, which was great technical skills out of university, but no context and experience. And I actually landed on the Philippines. Is anybody here offshoring? Okay, great. And have you had a good experience or mediocre?
I will never do it again.
There you go. That's usually the response I get. And the reason being is, and I tried and failed at the start as well, invested quite a bit of time to get it right. The reason that it doesn't work is because the markets that are supplying the talent to businesses, privately owned businesses like us in America, is very much the low level talent. So I'm going to share with you how to actually revisit offshoring so that it works properly, and how in fact we've been able to take that to a whole other level. It's really these frameworks coupled with engine rooms, as I call them. How do we keep our core onshore team and expand and contract with using 18 players offshore and that top 1% of talent? How we bring those two together in a co-managed service so that you own your own growth. So that's me, 25 years in business, lots of ups and downs. If you've ever done a lifeline like this before, it truly is a roller coaster. But the key thing that I wanted to show here is throughout my whole journey, peer learning, especially groups like this, Vistage, have really been the pinnacle of both learning and success for me. So I've gone from, my first business was a services-based business, a marketing agency. I was building other people's businesses. In fact, I worked with mergers and acquisition houses. They would come to me with a business that they wanted to sell in the next 12 to 18 months. They were trying to maximize the value of that business, put in these growth systems, help with offshoring it to make them highly profitable, drive that growth, and we get a higher multiple on the exit. They do due diligence and see that they had these repeatable, predictable revenue models, and we would get a better exit. It was my forum, which is similar to you in the room now, that said to me, well, why aren't you doing this for yourself? which at that point I started buying turnaround businesses. That's all I could afford at the time. And I would turn around those, build and exit those, build them to over 20 mil and exit them. And then that led to some fellow peers in my next forum saying, what would it look like if you were to do that with capital? And there was a number of them that were in private equity and venture capital, and we raised some money, and we started investing in businesses that way. So I've gone from, I would say, self-employed, not an entrepreneur, to an entrepreneur building and exiting my own businesses full swing, that now businesses come to me and say, can you help me do the same? Why I do all of this? I'm very passionate about women in business, obviously being a role model. I've got 2 daughters there and a stay-at-home dad. He's raised the kids since they were born. So that enabled me to continue to be a serial entrepreneur. And then on the right is my EA, and she's in the Philippines. When you look at all the sustainability goals and impact, investing has been a really important thing to me. I don't buy businesses that do bad by people or planet. But when I look at all the sustainability goals, what underpins most of them is providing financial independence to women in developing countries. So for me, being able to support them, they not only feed their own kids, but be the first person to buy their home. They put their sisters and brothers through universities. That ripple effect is really important to me. So that's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm trying to change the trajectory of women in business by mentoring as many as I can, by being a good role model to my 2 daughters, and they're a bit younger in that photo, and obviously helping those in developing countries. So, all right, back to you guys. Now, when I say what is the role of a CEO, these are the typical things that come up. No, well, I ask this question of pretty much all my mentors, and they have a different answer to what ChatGPT came up with. And that is that the job of the CEO is to own the growth. Our job is to figure out how to grow the business. And there is a lot of people that I meet, CEOs that I meet, that delegate their growth. What I mean by that is them blaming their marketing agency, their VP of sales, their one and only CMO or marketing manager who is expected to be an AI expert, a copywriter, a video editor, and all of those things. So I think it's really important that we take a moment to look at what I believe our role is to really focus on growth. And I put these into 3 buckets. So number 1, in order to fuel growth, giving away equity and raising capital is the most expensive form of funding growth. But for me, having healthy EBITDA and profit is critical. And I would add to that cash. I'm taking as much cash as I can, and putting it aside, so that I can go shopping. What I mean by that is, what I do like to do is, when there's hard times and people are sitting on their hands and, their tariffs are affecting them, whatever it is that's affecting them, that's when I like to go and buy market share. The second one is creating predictable, repeatable, and scalable revenue models. And when I ask people if they have a predictable, repeatable sales and marketing process, a lot of people say yes, but I will push back on that. One person in the last group, when I looked under the hood, about 40% of his business came from Amazon. To me, I said, well, actually, you don't own the customer. Jeff does. And our job is to figure out how to make sure that we can talk to those customers, and be able to create a repeatable process. So that's really important. So ask yourself, do you really honestly feel that you have a dial that you can turn up and down in your business? And the third one is, are you outperforming your industry's growth rate? And most industries that I'm going into at the moment are flatlining or declining. The ones that are doing really well are continuing to have great rate of growth that's very attractive to buyers. Regardless of whether you want to exit your business or not, running a business that is set up to sell just is a better run business. It doesn't have key person dependency. It has a lot of systems and processes in place. So that's always the goal, regardless of whether you want to sell or not, because on your balance sheet should be, you should have your P&L, your balance sheet, and on that should be EV, which is equity value. What are you creating as an asset, which is really important. So those are the three things we're going to focus on today. And let's have a look at my definition of agility, because I think the way businesses look and feel need to change dramatically. So agile workforces are really important, ones that can expand and contract to meet the market. Most long-standing businesses, what I would call a P&O in a Venice canal. What I mean by that is a lot of them are very big, and in order for them to move in a new direction, you have to break that P&O cruiser down and rebuild it facing in a different direction. What we really need to do is create businesses that can quickly respond to market changes. Obviously, AI plays a big role. We're going to be talking about agents today, healthy EBITDA and profit. These are the three key things. And if you can get that, you have a very valuable business. And most people take their businesses to market and sell them, and they've got one or two out of the three, but not three out of three. And that's really sad, because that's leaving a lot of money on the table, which is how private equity makes their money. How many of you feel that in 30 days you could pivot if you were to lose a major client? How many of you feel that you could easily pivot in 30 days and your team wouldn't explode or implode in the process?
No hands.
The interesting thing is we usually have to lead this change, and we're dragging people with the change. So my rule is, I always say to the team that we need to remain agile so that we can take advantage of opportunities. And if something happens to a particular market, we can easily pivot to a new one and be up and running in that market within 30 days. I'm really interested in how do I make sure I have multiple verticals and I can be agile and pivot as I need to. Most businesses take at least 12 to 18 months to do a pivot, which, as we know nowadays, is too long. Okay, so I want to introduce you to this basic concept. I look at the business, every business, in three buckets. Black is the strategy. What are we trying to achieve? So if we're looking at EOS, it's, what is your 1, 3, and 5 year goals, quarterly rocks, and then, breaking that down into 90-day execution plans. So what is it that we're trying to achieve? And we'd be looking at obviously those three key areas that we want to focus on. What is our target EBITDA, profit, and cash in reserve? What is our strategy for predictable revenue? And then, of course, how are we faring against the rest of the market? So black is where we always start. How are we looking at the moment? Where do we want to go? And then we go to the red. Red is everything in the business that you need to operate it, but doesn't drive the growth. So accounts, finance, compliance, reporting, HR. You need all of those things, but they're not physically generating any revenue. The answer's on the screen. Sales and marketing. Even the doers. If you've got a billable business, these are the charge out hours that you would charge out. The way that I approach red, blue, black is everything in red. I look at how do I make that as lean and efficient as possible, because it does not drive any revenue. So when I'm looking at anything in red, it needs to be either AI'd, offshore, or automated. In any business that I go into over 20 mil, I can usually free up about 1 to 2 mil in red, which can then be invested into blue. Most people complain that they don't have capital in order to drive growth, and I call BS. A lot of people are sitting on it. It's just that they haven't revisited their red in line with these three key drivers that can save money, and we're not reducing the quality. In fact, when we do this, how do we also increase efficiencies and upskill these departments in preparation for driving growth and the next stage of growth in the business based on our goals inside the black? Now let's look at your org chart, and this is really about how do we revisit this in light of what's happening. So I'm assuming you guys look at it the same way. A level 1 is your green people straight out of university, very little experience. Level 2s have some experience. Level 3s are more senior, and level 4 are your team leaders. And this is the confronting slide if you have teenagers like me. The level ones are getting wiped out by AI. They're going to be replaced with agents and are already starting to get replaced with agents. The reason I say this is because AI is already smarter than every graduate. They don't have context yet, they have the textbook knowledge. So AI can already do their job. What's interesting is the best prompters for AI and the people getting the most out of AI are people like you and me, because we have extensive context. We know how to do long form prompts. In fact, AI, the best prompts are 450 words long. So for me, these roles can be will be wiped out. They're already starting to get wiped out, and I'll show some AI agents a little later. The next step is looking at those 5-year plus. For me, when I offshore, I'm not looking at anyone really under 10 years of experience. I want really highly experienced people, and I want to be able to upskill in the process. So what I do is I actually create pods underneath my L3s onshore, and I'm able to 3x their output. And what I say to my onshore team is, you're now shifting to an 80-20 model, which is 80% of your time is now going to be client facing and looking after the clients, but not picking up the pen. Every time I see them pick up the pen, I go, that's not best use of your time. And underneath them, I create them a pod to be able to produce that work. Some of my clients even have shift work. So some are in construction and they'll have somebody working on an estimate during the day and at night so that they can turn those around quicker, or drafting, or whatever it is that their core business is. And in my case, I actually go 70, 10, 10, 10. I give them back 10% of their time. All our team are complaining that they're overworked and burnt out. So I incentivize them by creating pods so that they can get 10% of their time back. And then, of course, there's you and I and the department leaders sitting at the top. And we have now all joined the anti-retirement club because we cannot retire because we have the most context in the business, and AI needs that to learn about our business right now. We're almost mentoring AI in order to teach it our best practices, our secret sauce, and we're the ones at prompting that. So what I look at when I look at a business is, if you've recently had to do some reductions, if you've gone back to your core onshore team of 18 players, and that's a non-negotiable. If you're in B2B, you must have 18 players, because we all know the saying, 18 players hire 18 players, B team players hire C team players. So we want to make sure we stick to our A's. What we want to do here is look at our core team and then create pods underneath them, and then expand and contract as we need to. So if you're looking to go into a new market and test a new market, that would normally be quite a big task. You might have to hire some people in that area that have specialties. You want to test it first before you expand it. It takes time. Whereas for me, I can easily create a pod, maybe hire 1 or 2 people in that market onshore, usually only 1, create a pod underneath them, and then drive that and test that. And if it doesn't work in 30 days, I can easily expand or contract back. My rule is, how do we keep our onshorers, our core A team very tight onshore, and then the expanding and contracting happens through our offshore pods. And obviously, inside all of this, AI needs to be part of the organization and part of these pods and part of every single person's job description. But what's really important is that these onshore core A team players, they need to be agile. They need to have a huge thirst for learning. They need to be very resilient in their characteristics. And they need to be good team leaders so that we can expand the teams underneath them offshore so that they can be client facing. I've also been able to find what I would call unicorns offshore as well, who can be client facing. They've actually lived in America for 5 to 10 years and are able to be client facing as well. So let's have a look at some of the roles inside the Reds. So there's some typical roles that need to be either offshored or AI'd in the red. and there's some of the ones in the blue. I would also argue that customer service can be turned into a blue item. You just run a split test pilot for U-Haul, the trailer hire company, and they said they were skeptical. They said we couldn't outsource or offshore the customer service team. So we test our team in the Philippines against their onshore team, and we 10x'd what they did. People that we're putting in offshoring, they're not your cheap $5-6 an hour. They've worked for PwC and Deloitte's and big companies in America. So they've already got what's called the cultural fit because they've spent 10 years in US corporate. And when we put them remote, you run to EOS, they're all in the L10s. And as you know, in EOS, the first thing is a one-word barometer, share a personal win and a professional win. Everybody's getting to know each other, and you're part of a global team, because if we need 18 players, it doesn't matter where they are in the world, its territory is not relevant. And we can tap into a lot more. And the things that don't work is when it's clocking on and off and people are on different time zones. So I make sure that every single person that I hire offshore works to my hours. They have to work to the US hours, so that they're all in Zoom rooms together. We call them fly-ins. So everyone's in a Zoom room. You can fly in at any time and ask a question, or you can just sit there and hang out together in the Zoom room. So setting up that infrastructure is important. And the last thing I will say that I have it put in place is forum. So just like you have forum and the importance of forum and what this group brings to your life, the same thing I give to my team. So I partnered with a company called Melosi, which was out of Toronto. Mark Champagne is his name. And he runs forum for my teams. And they get to go and spend a couple of hours working on business, personal, and family. And it's completely confidential. And they get the benefit of forum as well to help them with their mental fitness. It's a mental fitness program. So, okay, well, let's have a look at this as well then. On the black side, these are the things that I really keep onshore. I make sure I have high quality exec teams, anyone who's a creative thinker, strategists, highly agile, okay with change. Those are the sorts of people I'm looking as part of my key exec team, and obviously account managers, things like that. And I would argue that most businesses that I go into say they have a sales team. Start differentiating between sales and account managers. A lot of them are just selling stuff to existing accounts. That's not a salesperson. A sales team is somebody who can go out, find new leads and convert those. So this is how I look at it. 90% of red is offshore or AI'd. 50-50 for the blue. You need to own your growth. You need to have in-house lead gen and marketing processes and people and AI. We do not delegate our growth to marketing agencies and other people to do that work. So building in-house marketing and lead gen is really important, and that can be powered by AI and offshoring, and I'll show you how that works. And then of course in the black, the sorts of roles that I'm hiring there are high-level EAs to support that exec team so that I can leverage the fact that they're costing me 250 plus each per person. So let's talk about offshoring. So that was a great segue. And really, this is just about the ability to be able to upskill and create flexibility inside your business. So how do we get buy-in from our team when they're all anti-offshoring? So I don't know if you've ever heard of the trilemma business model. So the dilemma is you have to choose between one of two things. A trilemma is when you have to choose 2 out of 3 things. So 2 of these you can have. So we'll use McDonald's as an example. If you want your food to be fast through a drive-through and you want it to be fairly cheap, then it's not going to be great quality, right? If you want it to be quality and speed, probably my airline. I'm always changing my flights last minute, but I want to be at the front of the plane, then, it's probably going to cost me a lot of money when I fly. Then I talk about how does this apply to your team? So having 18 players is non-negotiable. So that one we're keeping. But if we expect them to be on budget, we have to compromise whether they're on-prem or not. We have to go to a remote global workforce. And that's how I explain it to my team. The reason a lot of it fails, and actually 80% of roles churn in the first year in offshoring. Every 8 or 9 months they're leaving. So that's not going to work. And the reason is they give you a soft warm body and they're like, good luck. So it's really important you have a strategy for how you approach offshoring. And these are the things that you want to avoid. You don't want low-level talent. You don't want them working on different shifts unless they're part of a pod that has some overlap and some handover. Most people don't get integrated well, and they're certainly not upskilling them. So how we do it differently. So you need detailed SOPs based on the roles that you're putting in place. We have our EGS frameworks. So whenever we hire someone in the blue, which might be a marketing or lead gen person, we have an EGS process that goes with that person, and they're pre-trained in it. Even if they're a LinkedIn specialist and they've done 10 years in LinkedIn and they're a sales navigator expert, we still train them for 2 to 3 months in our EGS process before we deploy them into businesses. The second one is the strategy around how you approach it. For our marketing roles, we always put in a fractional that's offshore that manages that team. So you've got team managers on both sides, and then that way, even though they're all in the same L10, your onshore person who has the pod underneath them is only dealing with one person who then manages that team day in, day out throughout the day. We need at least 3 months on build and 3 months on optimization. So we need to have that 90-day rocks and rolling execution plans, and everything needs to be scorecarded and reported. I mean, these are best practices in business. You should have them anyway, but even more so when you're looking at this global workforce model. Everybody needs to know, have a project. We use monday.com. Everyone needs to have tasks assigned, know what the quarterly rocks are, and the team needs to be working together on those rocks. And you need to be reviewing it at least weekly in your L10s. Make sure that they're following your US hours and holidays. That's their night shift in the Philippines, which they like working the night shift because they get to take the kids to school in the morning. We let them work from home. This is how we're headhunting the top talent. And we say to them, okay, we'll match your salary. We're going to give you a 20% pay increase to work the US hours. So you're going to save yourself 3 hours a day in commuting or more to the office in Manila. You can work from home, and we extend medical to them and all their kids. So we make it really attractive to when we headhunt them. And the best people are not looking at job boards. So we have these Zoom rooms or team meets where you can fly in at any time. Our comms channel is Slack. So, hey, I'm just going to grab a coffee, or I'm just going on my lunch break. We just constantly have that communication going all day. Daily huddles, weekly L10s, rolling 90-day plans, and quarterly performance reviews. This is particularly important for customer service teams. I think you mentioned you had teams. They don't work off commission, they work off salary. So just having those little kickers, for the U-Haul team, we threw them all $50 for exceeding their targets for the quarter, and they were beside themselves. Obviously, with everything that I do, it's always about not taking advantage and making sure that we're going above and beyond legislation. So for us, having a hardship fund so that we can keep them active and working. There's a lot of typhoons there, so if they lose internet, we can put them up in a hotel. It's just about keeping them working, and then of course we have our 90-day rolling day plan. Having a full-time job is their number one priority. So most of them have been with us for 6 years. Okay, well, wages are not going to be getting any better. Basically, it's going to continue to rise. So the labor market is not going to get any better. So let's have a look at what it looks like if we're to rethink offshoring with the lens of top talent only. So let's start at the bottom. The tech that you need to run some of these agents, you're looking between $1.5 and $2,000 to get those set up and running each month. So your tech bill will go up, but still going to be a lot cheaper because you're taking out, say, 4 full-time roles. And then the next level up, 5 years experience offshore, is between 2.5 and 3.5 thousand a month, all inclusive. and 10 years plus is 3.5 to 4.5. As mentioned, we have been able to find some L4s offshore, and those ones usually have lived in America for a period of time on a visa. So they're very Americanized, and they've gone back to the Philippines because of family. So we can pick those up. They're still $6,000 a month, but when I look at what I'd be paying for that person onshore, it's completely different. So they're your CMOs, your CFOs, COOs, anyone in those high level roles. So they're sort of the monthly rates that you're looking at. And again, 30 days notice. The other thing I like about the Philippines is their college and their schooling system is identical to America. So there's no skills gap there. And it's the most sophisticated offshoring market. I know a lot of people like Mexico because it's near shore. The issue I have with that is that they haven't worked for American companies before, a lot of them. So they've worked locally or straight out of university. So again, they're very green. What I like about the Philippines is all the major publicly owned companies and the large privates have back offices there. So, you've got all your airlines, PwC and Deloitte's, your large construction companies. They've all got large offices, back offices in the Philippines. So we basically go in and headhunt them once they've done 10 years with those organizations. So it's really quite seamless, the integration, because of that. All right, so let's look at agents. Let's look at these L1 roles and what we're currently doing. We're seeing this effectively. What we want to do is make sure that our SOPs are in place. So a lot of people say, oh yeah, I want to utilize AI, and it's only as good as what you feed it. So garbage in, garbage out. So my question to all of you is, what shape is your current SOPs in for each role? Most people, it's in their head, and that's not going to help. And whether they're willing to train the AI from out of their head to AI is usually another stumbling block. What we do is we bring in a short-term CTO who has experience, say, in the construction sector, and we say map out and create the process flow for this role or this task. It's actually more task driven. Create the SOP and then build the agent to do that. So I'll give you some examples of some of the agents that we've been able to build inside the red roles. This is really important to start with the red. There are blue roles. We've just created and nearly refined a social media agent. It's starting to happen in the blue, but I'm sure you can imagine some of these things would be very helpful. There's just so many boring things that we have to do inside the business that we need to keep across that agents can actually report on. And guess what? They never get sick. And then there's no human error. No one onshore likes doing these tasks anyway. So that's taking AI to the next level. It's not going out and doing task orientation. It becomes the person. You constantly training it in your ways. All right, let's talk about predictable revenue. How many of you can say that you know your numbers, your magic numbers? So for every 200 people that you nurture that are on your target list of ideal B2B clients, out of that generates 22 meetings, which generates 14 proposals, which leads to 8 new clients and 3 that end up being repeat clients. Who knows their magic numbers like that? So if you're meant to own your growth, do you think you should know your magic numbers? Kind of really important, right? And each customer avatar has different magic numbers. I'm always tracking, okay, well, what's my magic numbers inside this vertical versus this vertical, so that I can then decide, okay, well, I know now that for every 200 I nurture, I end up with 3 clients that are long-term clients, and I know how long that takes, that process. I know where to apply my efforts. I know which conferences to go to and speak. I know, what content to create for those industries. So it's very important to know your numbers so you can make strategic black decisions around that. So I'm going to show you an example of how that works and a scorecard, and I can give you that as a model after today. So this is the EGS component that we were talking about at the start. So these are all the direct-to-consumer EGS modules that we can just plug into a business. The things on the left are the real photos of the products. Everything on the right there is all done with AI. None of those humans are real. I think that's sufficient for social media compared to an expensive photo shoot. For copy, if you have anyone writing you content, blogs, white papers, whatever it is, I give them 15 minutes for brainstorming. Usually they take, a couple of weeks to come up with a white paper. There's no need for that anymore. We have tools like AnyWord. You go into and you say, okay, this is my customer avatar. This is the B2B client that we're targeting. This is everything about that avatar. Then you write a brief of what that social media post is, or that white paper, or that blog, and it will give you a score down the bottom here, this 91%. It will give you a score of how likely it is that that customer is going to read that content, that person that you're targeting. Most of the time, professional copywriters don't get past a 35%. So they spend hours writing this copy and it has a 30% chance of a click-through rate. So I say to them, just do a really rough draft of what you're thinking, put it in first, and then when it gets to 30%, then you click a button and you say rewrite it, and it will rewrite it to get it to a 90% click-through rate. That is a lot better than the old agency approach, which is, hey, we're going to spend 2 months on creating all these pretty ads for you, and we've got all these great ideas, and then we're going to throw $10,000 at it to see which ad gets the best click-through. You don't need that anymore. We can test in this environment. In fact, this is looking at between $6 and $10 billion worth of ad spend in real time every month, and then telling us how the changes in click-through are happening in real time. So there's really no excuse anymore. We should be producing content at scale with tools like this that are targeted to our ideal customer. So I'm going to take you through one of these modules. This one's the LinkedIn outbound lead gen. So I believe that salespeople, real salespeople that are hunting for new prospects, should be doing closing only, no hunting and gathering. It is not best use of their time to be going through LinkedIn, to be, going to these conferences and just collecting business cards. We need to really leverage what they charge us as their base salary and the commissions that they demand. So on the left is a typical salesperson who's doing all three roles, hunting, gathering, and closing. And on the right is the outcomes that we get when we pair that salesperson with a lead gen specialist. And I'm going to take you through this SOP now so you can see an example of how it works. So the first thing that we do is create pillars of content. So with LinkedIn, it's algorithm based. Please don't use an AI bot in your LinkedIn. They're getting shut down at record pace. So in LinkedIn, what happens is there's three important pillars. You need to talk about yourself and your expertise in as it relates to business. You need to talk about your business, and then you need to talk about yourself. People buy from people, so there has to be a personal element. I'm not suggesting you become an Instagrammer and photograph what you had for breakfast, your croissant. What I'm suggesting is that you value their time and you share a little bit more about your background as to why you got here. Then we have an onshore journalist. So again, she's 90% client facing. She's interviewing our CEOs. Mickey interviews me for 1 hour every month on Riverside, which is another AI tool, which will splinter that into all sorts of content. But she has context, so she knows what questions to ask. That's best use of her time. AI takes care of the rest. So in order to do that, 1 hour creates 2 to 3 posts on my personal profile on LinkedIn. Corporate isn't that important, your corporate profile. Yes, you have to be posting on there, but people will only go to the corporate to see, okay, where does this person come from? That it's just a quick reference check. It's almost like a LinkedIn Google, like where do they come from? I still believe that B2B pay-per-click does not work. I've never seen it work. You don't sell to people in B2B, you serve people. It's selling to serve, and it's positioning yourselves as the experts, and that takes content, time, relationships, but we can use digital to amplify that, which is this process. But it still comes back to that EAT strategy, which is experienced, expertise, authority, and trusted. So as we use monday.com, so then my team is basically scheduling all the posts. I just go in. So I've done my 1 hour interview a month. Then what I do is I go in, usually I do this on the plane. I review the content and I approve the content so that they can schedule it out, and they schedule it at the optimal times. But they're scheduling those 2 to 3 days. And that's really important because that boosts the algorithm, which means that you are going to show up in the feed of all the people that you're targeting. And now I'm going to show you how you do the targeting on the other side. So what we do is we have a full-time LinkedIn outbound specialist that sits on my personal account. I have one 40 hours. Some of our clients share that resource 20 hours per across 2 people. So we've got our target list, and then we create scripts. And what's interesting is that when you comment on a post, it needs to be more than 3 words. So you want at least a good full sentence when you're commenting on things. So they're doing that for 200 new people every week. And then we have this script that we follow when we're targeting people. So we do 3 weeks of warming. This week, she's liking and commenting on 200 people from my target list. Next week, she's liking and commenting on another 200, and the past week's 200. And then the week after that, she's doing 600 because she's got the next 200. So you can see how quickly this becomes a full-time job, because she's got to go into each profile individually, because we can't use bots, like and comment, like and comment. What's great about that is that from all the people that I'm liking and commenting on, by the time I send the connection request on week 4, which says it can't be anything salesy, it says, I've really enjoyed your post. I see that you also know. And then sometimes most of the people that I'm targeting, I have a minimum of 20 shared connections. So I'll say, I see that we have a lot of shared connections. Are you also in YPO? Or are you also in Vistage? My connection acceptance rate, so for request to exception, is 70%. Why that is important is because now my content, my 2 to 3 posts, are all showing up in their feed every week for those people who are my target clients. So that's a great way to remain top of mind. But then we go into a messaging sequence. We want at least 5 deep before we go, hey, you know what? It'd be great to learn more about your business. I'm back from travels next week. How is your calendar looking? Let's get a spot. Here's my calendar link. And we need to be tracking that. And I'm going to show you the scorecard. So leading up to conferences, the same thing happens. We start at least 2 months before the conference. We comment, we make a connection, and we start having a basic conversation. And then we say, oh, would you happen to be going to the lodging conference in a couple of weeks' time? We know they are, by the way. And then they say, yeah. Okay, well, there's over 1,000 people going. There's nearly 2,000 people going. Why don't we make a time to meet up at the conference for coffee? So all of this has been done by my LinkedIn specialist. And if you have a look at this conference scorecard, these are 3 conferences. We went through and cleaned the list beforehand, because not everybody who's going to a conference is our ideal clients. So out of the 2,896, 71% of those were ideal clients. This is the important stuff. We had 53 meetings booked at those conferences, those 3 conferences, and then there was a virtual one, and 89 post-conference. How many of your salespeople are going to conferences and booking that many meetings with ideal clients? We really just want them going as attendees, and ideally you speaking there as a subject expert. This is how we get to our magic numbers. So we're rounding this up nicely. So we have an 8-step customer value journey that takes people from unaware of who you are to aware, because you've been liking and commenting on their posts. But here's what we're doing is, so 200 are going in every week, 200 new of our targets. These are our profile views. That's what I'm talking about there. How many people actually looked at my profile each week? What are my impressions? So you can see from the first week that I started targeting this particular group of customers, by the end, 4,000 impressions. So I'm showing up in a lot of their feeds. So we're measuring at every stage of the funnel, but this is the important thing. From 200 that we're putting in, this is how many meetings that are booked. And then the most important thing is how many of those are leading to converted clients, which is 6. So 1,000 nurtured 40 something meetings booked and 6 clients won. That's how you get to your magic numbers. The reason it's important to measure at every step of the funnel is because if I'm not happy with my conversions, if down here I only win 1 client after all that effort, I can go back in here and I can say, where is it falling off?
I have a question. You are not measuring all this. You have somebody measuring this for you that's
Yes.
offshore.
I have a full-timer working on my LinkedIn. She books the meetings. She puts it in my HubSpot and my CRM. She tags the salespeople and tells them and all the briefers in the CRM. So it depends on what your definition of success is, and we start with that benchmarking. So for example, another client that we have, one of their contracts is a minimum of 2 million, right? So their idea of success would be to win 1 RFP every quarter. So it's a longer sales cycle, but that's why we do in this process here, we map out the customer value journey to figure out what is your definition of success and how long does it take? Because what we want to do is reduce the sales cycle, increase the conversion, and have this engine room going. You will know what will be a good ROI and what the lifetime value of one of your clients will be. So we map this out first so that we know what the definition of success is and where we're trying to get them to. So do you guys have a pre-product that you're going out to market with and saying, mine is a red, blue, black assessment? I go out and I say, look, I can come into a red, blue, black assessment. We'll have a look at everything in your red, free up some cash to invest in your blue, and I'll help you with your growth strategy. That's my pre-product. Do you guys have something that's a really compelling offer that you go in with your B2B clients?
Everybody thinking just with that question.
So this is where we start. So I'm going to send you all of this on email. This is a worksheet, and you're going to go through and you're going to have a look at each of your departments, what roles you have, what skill level they are now, because we want to upskill them on what your salary is and what you want to do with that role. That then creates for you this budget, which is on the next tab of the worksheet. I'll work through this with you if you want to book a time with me, but we're basically going to go through, we're going to look at how many cost savings can we generate in the red. Let's put half of that money back on your bottom line, and let's invest the other half in blue activity to build out some of these strategies that I've just shown you. Let's have a session on your sales and marketing so I understand what you're currently doing and what the opportunity is there to drive predictable revenue. And look at AI agents. Just pick one thing and create an agent.
Do you act like a PEO where you're gonna go find that talent for me? Do I pay EGS? How does that work?
So we don't charge for recruitment. We're headhunters. We shortlist them. We were not going to send you 100 resumes. We're going to shortlist the people. We're going to put together 2 to 3 candidates for each role that are ideal. So any of those would be great. And then you get to pick from those 2 to 3 candidates in the red role. That's the red. In the blue, we come in and we co-manage that. If I give you a LinkedIn specialist or a content creator or a video multimedia artist, you are not going to know how to manage them. No offense. And either's your CMO. So we come in for that first 3 to 6 months. We build it in with you. We meet you. We manage the whole process to the EGS. And then only when we have the magic numbers and only when you can manage it yourself in-house do we step away, and then you keep that team. So that's usually a 3 to 6 month process with a CMO and the team. So we come in and do that as a co-managed service, but you own those people, you own those processes. So you can't be dependent on me, which is why I'm trying to give you these trilemma models and these red, blue, blacks. You can go back into your businesses and start talking in this language and taking them on that journey. Otherwise, they're all going to be scared rocking in the corner in about 12 months' time.